We all have a mental picture of the working poor, right? Maybe a guy like this in Appalachia comes to mind, or a messy yard, or even the projects. We have heard so many stereotypes over the years, like poor people are financially irresponsible, or are looking for a handout, or are lazy, or even bad parents. These stereotypes create distance between us.
And those stereotypes end up driving decisions in business, nonprofits, and in the media.
Over 40% of Americans are having a hard time paying bills, putting food on the table, and clothes on their children's backs. That's 120 million people, which is more than the number of baby boomers in America.
So the reality is this: none of us has to travel very far to find people who are struggling, people who work and are still broke. There are neighbors, our friends, our coworkers. We just don't see their struggle. So we wanted to take a trip to understand the reality behind the numbers and break down a few stereotypes. So we looked at 2 counties in our own backyard: Fairfield County, Connecticut, a county with suburban and urban areas, and Bennington County, Vermont, which is pretty rural. Nice place, right?
I know. This place is beautiful. When you drive through the town, it's filled with lovely B&Bs, restaurants, outlet stores, and a really amazing private school that interestingly functions as the local public school as well. On the outskirts, you see stately farmhouses with manicured yards, all less than half an hour from great ski resorts. But just below the surface, hidden behind a hedge or around a corner, are Manchester's working poor. And just to be clear, every region in America has its hidden 40% of people struggling to get by.
So here's what we learned in Manchester. We uncovered a story of backsliding. Households with college degrees and middle-class expectations who now find themselves in quite a different situation.
No, it doesn't feel middle class. It feels like we're always like on the poverty line. Yeah, day to day, that's how it feels. And I mean, like we have to get state insurance and, and to me, growing up, if we never had anything like super luxurious or anything. Everything was very practical in my home growing up. But if something was broken, the next day, like my dad got it fixed or hired someone to fix it. And it was like everything was maintained. And so to be here, it's really like it's super overwhelming sometimes because it may not be fixed for the next 3 years. And every day you're just like, can you fix that? And it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And Melissa, remember Dawn who asked us not to videotape her? She was raised in a pretty prosperous home, but has never been able to achieve that level of comfort in her own life.
I come from a little bit of affluence, and I've just slid downwards my entire adult life. By the numbers that I read and in the news, our income level is technically middle class, but is living in the trailer park middle class? Because that's really sad. Is that where we're at?
And we also met Ellen and her husband, who together have 4 jobs. And that's still not enough to keep the bills paid.
We're 2 months behind on our mortgage because of the summer schedule with Charlie not making as much money. So, we're working with the mortgage company trying to get caught up. I had my student loans that were, our tax return got taken by the government because the student loan company I'm working with didn't continue to auto deduct my monthly payment, which after they got my income and figured everything out, they were like, wow, you don't make a lot of money. And I was like, no, I don't. So I've had time to process it. The first 2 days, I just cried.
I think the thing that was really interesting about meeting these women was the realization that there's not a lot of distance between us. We're educated, work hard, and believe in the dream. But for them, living a life that's the opposite of what you expected is daunting and not reflected in big data or media sound bites.
To get an expert perspective, we turned to Lori Zeef, a partner in Elm Counseling. Lori has brought a variety of much-needed services to the underserved communities in Vermont for over 25 years. She shed some light on the realities of being kind of poor in a world where most programs are focused on people in more dire economic situations.
If you're really poor, you can access a variety of things. You can get fuel assistance. That's another thing that, as Heartworks, what we do, we have bought a tank of oil for people. We have had a cord of wood delivered for people who, if you're really poor, you get help with that. If you're kind of poor, you don't. So if you're bringing home $400 a week and your rent, the least expensive rent I can think of around here, if you're not in subsidized housing, aka really poor, then your rent is going to be at least $1,100 and up a month. So, right?
For an urban view, we took a trip to Bridgeport, Connecticut, located in northern Fairfield County. Fairfield County's affluence is legendary, largely due to its famous Gold Coast, located within commuting distance to New York City. Towns like Greenwich, New Canaan, Darien, and Westport are known as being bastions of wealth and privilege. Home to many Manhattan business executives, the area is famous for its waterfront estates, Tony private clubs, and great schools, with vibrant business centers in Stamford and Norwalk. Darien, one of the richest towns in the U.S., boasts a median family income of $196,000 per year, with only 0.6% of people living below the poverty line.
A short trip north on I-95 reveals a very different story. Bridgeport is a historic town that became a major manufacturing center in the state, but fell on hard times due to job losses. Median family income is now about $40,000 a year. Think about that. In an area as expensive as Fairfield County, that's hard. And 16% of Bridgeport residents live below the poverty line. We asked Valerie Schultz-Wilson, CEO of the Connecticut Food Bank, to give us a perspective on how Bridgeport is evolving.
I believe that the area, for starters, it's become more brown, right? It's become less affluent. To whom much is given, much is required, is what my mother used to always tell me. But you can't be 10 minutes away living in, just extreme wealth and have all of this poverty right under your nose and not care about it. But if you look at the Bridgeport Public Schools, for example, it has schools that are probably 98 to 100% free and reduced lunch. Those affluent folks, many times they fight tooth and nail to keep the resources from coming back to a community like Bridgeport with respect to education, and education dollars is the one that really comes to mind.
In Bridgeport, we encountered the urban version of the middle class slide. Jocelyn, whose dad was a barber in Norwalk, couldn't afford to raise her kids there. So she, like her friends, ended up moving to Bridgeport, which was more affordable. And like the other women we met, she had attended college and still struggled to maintain her life in Bridgeport.
When I first came to Bridgeport, it was like shell shock, because it's like shell shock. Like, it's like, what is this? Like, this environment, it was just weird to me. Like, I grew up in East Norwalk, and it was like, we played outside, we did all this stuff from ran and play, and my mother was at home most until I was like 12, so I wasn't used to I'm like, what is going on here? I make like 17 something an hour now or something, but still not enough to still meet your needs, because it's hard to get your household products, get everything that you need to try to help your kids get the things that they need. On like about $2,000 with taxes taken out, with $2,000 a month, it's not enough. I have to be flexible with myself and with what they have to do or whatever program. And I'm revolving my world around making sure I'm getting them to place, just so that they can have a better opportunity or better education and stuff, so that they don't, you know what I'm saying, so they can get out and know different things and they're just not hanging out on the street. Right. But it's a lot of people in the same situation here. And sometimes I feel like God put me in a place of this so I could understand. I don't think, like, if I stayed in Norwalk, I would never understand what's happening with poverty, like, because this was just a different world for me. It's just not an environment that I would want to be in, and I didn't want my kids really growing up in this environment. But if you don't have money to go anywhere else, like, what do you do?
Let's listen to Charlene's story.
I went to college. I did 4 years, so I have my bachelor's degree, and I am currently working now as administrator for a retail company. I worked in the hospitality industry for years, so I do a night audit for 2 nights, Sunday and Monday nights. That's just to make ends meet, basically, to fill a gap, fill a void, and to make sure that I can become, because now I'm a single mom, so that transitioned me into finding supplementary income and to find ways in which I can make sure maintain my lifestyle and to also take care of my son. But when I was married, we were still struggling just the same, because when I had him, I was still joining line at the pantry. And I was married at that time, and he was working, I was working, and I was still at the pantry trying to get meals. I don't want to live off the system. I don't want to live to have the government. I want to be independent and to be able to function. So that is why I try to, whatever it takes for me to do it, meaning if I have to go to the food pantry, if I have to depend on other help with the community from the churches or from the local groups, I will do that to make sure that I have a balance.
In Manchester and Bridgeport, we're witnessing firsthand the long-term impact of real wages not having increased in over 40 years.
So why is it so hard to accept that many of our fellow Americans can't make it? Why do some of us feel that poor people are responsible for their own situation?
Our history as rugged individualists has ingrained in us that it is within everyone's power to become economically successful. Stereotypes are perpetuated like this one we literally heard the other day. If you work 2 jobs and can't support your family, you must be buying iPhones and gold jewelry. Or another one of our favorites, if you have a college education and can't get a great job, you must have majored in art history.
If we face the fact that hardworking Americans can do everything right and still struggle, are we admitting this could happen to us? Does it bring the specter of economic loss and struggle too close? Or does it call into question the belief that if we all work hard, we can make it?
We work. We're working. We're trying to give back. We're trying to pay taxes. We're trying to do that. What is out there for us? For people who really don't want to be dependable on the system or on the government to take care of us. What is out there for us? Are you saying, okay, work more and then we find our sons incarcerated or our kids abandoned and stuff like that? What is out there for us that can be able to alleviate that? So for those who are working and really seriously are trying to get additional help, and being honest about it, they can't get it because they put a level there that says, okay, if you're working and making 45, I cannot help you. Yeah. So how is it that we balance? I signed up even for the Care for Kids to say, okay, maybe they will help me. That was like the worst. They're saying, okay, you're over income by $100. One time I asked, okay, so should I not be working to get your help? Because basically they're putting it at a scale that is telling you that, hey, stop working and then I can help you. And having a degree, going to school, having a degree, I thought that would make a difference, but they're not even paying us for having that qualification.
The biggest example of what Charlene is talking about is healthcare. It's a huge expense that's often out of our control, creating a financial glass ceiling in low-income America that many people will never be able to break through.
So you get Medicaid for everybody, until you don't. So that's a line that working poor walk really, some people really carefully. Some people purposely don't take a raise or don't take the extra, or will work 1 day less a week of work or something to keep themselves below that number.
What's really hard to accept in America is that this financial glass ceiling is creating a geographic and social chasm between those who struggle and those who are not struggling, resulting in feelings of less than.
Being a farmer here, I think, unless you are from the city and come up here and create a gentleman's farm, completely sucks. Because there's no way you can like meet the expectations for what you're supposed to be. It stinks.
Up to a certain point, I think it's easy to pretend. Banks really don't want your house, they want your money, so you're in foreclosure for quite a while before you actually get kicked out. So, the facade you put on when you're dropping your kid off at school doesn't show the fact that, you're 6 months late on your mortgage and you don't know how you're going to pay for it.
The women we spoke to were millennials who should be in their prime earning years, but this generation seems to be backsliding even before they get started. As a generation, their struggle is well documented, and to make matters worse, many of them have witnessed their own parents losing jobs, homes, and retirement savings. And this is why they question whether what was once known as the American dream really exists.
So what have we learned? Our visit reveals two common problems. Number one, the profound middle class slide. Number two, the glass ceiling that exists when you make too much for Medicaid or scholarships to day camp, but too little to afford basics like healthcare. We have literally seen the hopelessness of working two good jobs and still not making it.
But these common problems have unique local solutions. In Bridgeport, Valerie shared an interesting perspective on the importance of community engagement.
We have to continue to advocate for the folks that are voiceless. I think that's really important for the entire nonprofit sector. I think that's what we need to do first and foremost. And then second, I believe we've got to start to educate folks, the people that we serve. It's around community organizing, around the fact that yes, they do have a voice. Yes, they can, enact change. They can go to the voting booths. They can go to town hall meetings. They can go to the superintendent's office. I mean, we have got to make our folks feel valued and that they do have a voice. And there are some wonderful examples of that. Over at P.T. Barnum, there's a program of single moms and a low-income community, right? Housing authority based community. They advocated for their kids to get a new school. They've advocated for more police. They've advocated. So we've got to really make that a priority. Right. And I think it's
local.
It's
local.
Local. It's very grassroots and it's very local.
Yeah,
it's not always about Hartford or Washington.
Right.
I mean, we've got to make sure that we convene all of the people in the community. We're great at convening politicians and leaders and nonprofit executives, but we're not so good at convening the people in the trenches and living this each and every day.
So let's take a look at what people in the trenches did in Lancaster, PA, and learn from their experience. Lancaster was suffering in the 1980s, so concerned citizens of different cultural and political stripes came together to form Hourglass, an organization focused on the idea that time was running out for their town. By asking members to check their politics at the door and focus on solving local problems, Hourglass achieved many of its goals. Now, Lancaster outperforms many adjacent cities in reducing poverty, attracting young professionals, and creating a thriving community. One of the biggest things that we learned about ourselves is that we live in a bigger bubble than we thought, and that we all need to think about our communities more broadly.
This is because driving social change is not just about donating money. It's about engaging directly and supporting people who are trying to make change, like Lori and Valerie, and reaching beyond your immediate community to improve the lives of the broader area. Our sense of being an American neighborhood is diminishing. There's just less connective tissue binding us. It's important to remember that those other people out there are working hard and raising families just like you.
Most of us live in neighborhoods with people who are just like us, and research reveals that we might have a little fear of people who are different.
Setting aside our fears of people who are different can be powerful. Imagine what could be accomplished if people in counties like Fairfield and Bennington brought their collective resources together, checked their politics and fears at the door, and focused creatively on what they could do to improve the lives of their neighbors. What if?